comparing ourselves to other municipalities, we do have a large council, there's no doubt about it, with the exception of Graham and Ann. But even St. Stephen, I think, might be similar sized or one smaller, and they're about double the population.
But we're excited to get this started and see how this does turn out for the island.
We would caution them about that because we're just concerned that, we're going to get to a point where our volunteer force is just, exhausted.
We will begin by meeting your candidates in alphabetical order.
Welcome to This Week Uncut, where we take a look at the week's top stories from CHCO-TV and The Courier. I'm Nathalie Sturgeon.
And I'm Vicki Hogarth. Starting this week in St. Stephen at the Garthland Civic Center. Last Friday we hosted Meet Your Candidates for St. John, St. Croix. And in attendance we had Andrew Hill for the NDP, Gerald Irish for the Green Party, Karen Ludwig for the Liberal Party, and John Williamson from the Conservative Party, our incumbents. Keith Tays, who is running for the Libertarian Party, was unable to attend due to illness, but we were very much pleased with the turnout, both in terms of the candidates and the audience. What was your impression of having watched the event?
Yeah, it seemed like the crowd was lively enough. They were clapping, they were engaged, they were listening. I actually thought that the candidates displayed good answers, a general level of civility that would have been expected. I think everybody did very well, and they answered in informative and responsible ways.
The feedback's been great so far from people that attended in person. It's now available if you didn't get to come out last week to the event on CHCO's YouTube channel, as well as CHCO-TV, which is home to both the TV station and the St. Croix Courier online. And it's playing most weekday nights around 7 p.m. on the channel, as well as other times in the afternoon on the weekend. So if you check our TV guide on our website too, that'll give you all the different playing times of that on the channel if you prefer to watch on TV. But it was a really exciting event. I felt the same way. I thought the answers were great. It's definitely that opportunity that voters look for to hear from all the candidates in depth. All the questions as well were pre-submitted by the public. We had the chance to vet them here at CHCO to make sure they were all fairly articulated and covered all the topics that seemed to be coming in from the public. What did you think in terms of the questions that we saw?
I was surprised by the amount of questions that we got in the especially in that last home stretch right before it happened, and the questions were actually well formulated and they were well thought out. And it really speaks to Canadians' engagement in this election and the issues that they find are important: pharmacare, healthcare, crime, Trump, the Trump administration, Trump tariffs, the trade war. All these things were on the minds and are on the minds of Canadians as they head to the ballot box.
Definitely. And again, we saw the Campobello Ferry come up, this time in a different context, when we're looking at the tightening of the border and the issues that many Canadians are facing. Campobello Islanders are in this unique geography, so I really wasn't surprised to see that question come up again. But given the context that it comes to us in this time round, definitely made, I think, the candidates take that question very seriously. We were able to cover 10 big questions, 10 broad topics, and also give time for opening statements, closing statements, alternating who went first for everyone for fairness. But definitely I think it's one of those things that when you get the chance to hear for 2 hours, it's almost a 2-hour event on television, you get to hear directly from the candidates. It really helps you inform your vote, or sometimes just makes you aware of why you made the choice prior to seeing it that you did, if you did early vote. What did you think of in terms of, have you been to vote yet already?
I haven't been to vote yet. I barely have time to sleep and eat. So, but I will probably take advantage of the advanced polling days. Those are available. Those will be coming up soon. And but I also want to give a nod to the team here who did incredible work to put that together, including yourself. Excellent moderation, calm, collected, very thoughtful moderation. And, this little team here moves mountains sometimes, and I don't think the public realizes that what it takes to put an event like that together. You have to coordinate the space, you have to light it properly, you have to run all the cables, you have to run all the equipment, you have to set up all the cameras. Flo is in the background kind of controlling all of the angles and all of the cameras, and you've got Patrick running a camera, and Jeff Lively helped us as well, who works here as well. So
Autumn Williams, who's 14, got to give a big shout out to Autumn. She does some of her schoolwork here every Friday. She comes in and does a stage with us at 14. And last Friday we took her to cover, I think, one of the biggest events a 14-year-old could have the opportunity to see their name in the credits and be a part of. It was pretty neat.
And it's the thing that comes to mind is that this is just a small thing that we do for our community, and many communities across this province and in other parts of the country as well are not as fortunate to have media at home with them doing these things. So a nod to you and the team and to the public for showing up and participating as well.
It was definitely a pleasure to moderate. I know I went into it feeling a little nervous when you're in a snap election season, especially a time like this that due to international politics as well, it feels so polarizing. But when you bring that home to your community and you see that civility just between the candidates and the audience, it was a really wonderful experience. And I do want to give a shout out to the Municipal District of St. Stephen, who have always been our partners in these events. They offer us this incredible space at the Garsland Civic Center. Mayor Alan McEachran was there. I saw Councillor Brian Cornish in the audience too. Michelle Vast, who is such a familiar face to anyone who knows St. Stephen just because of all her incredible events coordination that she does. Even took the night to be our timer when we were a little short of volunteers. She's like, I'll stay around and do that. She was going to stay in the audience anyway, so she came up front and was in the audience. But I mean, we had about a week, I think, really preparing here at CHCO for it. But we've been always used to sort of spinning last minute and getting ourselves ready to do something that even in a snap election we can still pull off.
And I wondered if you could explain to the folks how you made it fair for everybody in terms of their responses and that sort of thing.
We always have taken the approach that if we just say always we do alphabetical order, then that ended up being that Andrew Hill went first. We do alphabetical order, starting with the opening statements. And then after opening statements, question 1 goes to the second person alphabetically, and we alternate accordingly. And that way, I don't know necessarily who will get what question first. And it makes it fair, it makes it interesting too, because sometimes it depends what order you go in the questions to see maybe you do want to respond to something someone else said. So it gives candidates that opportunity too, if in their response, well, maybe if they're third that time, they can take a hit at maybe something someone said a few people before. So it's always interesting, and definitely it's been a process that we've established for many elections past that seems to work for us, and I think that everyone knows what they're getting when they come out to one of those events. So it does make it fair and also very special that we're able to pull it off.
Fairness is a big part of what we do during the election season, offering everybody the same airtime, offering the same opportunities. We're hoping that all of the candidates will get their profiles in so we can feature them in the Courier.
As well.
I have a couple of them already, still waiting on 2. So hopefully once we get those in, that we'll be able to publish those as well.
Yes, you know who you are if you're watching this at home right now and you haven't sent in your profile. But I definitely hear every election, whether it's municipal, provincial, or federal, we hear from the public, both the ones in the audience day of, and also who watch on television and online after, that this is how they really feel comfortable with their vote after they've seen the night. And I myself do the same. I'm going to vote election day because I like the thrill of it, but I definitely take this event very seriously, not just as a moderator, but as a voter.
And it's this. Canadians are in the mood for change. I hear that when I talk to people. We heard that when we took questions. They're in the mood for change. They have a desire for change, and I'm very eager and excited to see what the outcome actually is and sort of what Canadians decide they would like to see in their government.
We did last call out for questions the day before the event, and I think, I can't tell you how many dozens and dozens of emails came in with last minute questions, but they all definitely were informed what we asked that night.
Yeah, so voters go to the polls on April 28th. We're going to take a quick break, but we'll be right back with This Week Uncut.
But to be clear, one bad day in the firefighting world can ignite a catastrophic series of events, as we have seen across the country and around the world.
Welcome back to This Week Uncut. I'm Vicki Hogarth.
And I'm Nathalie Sturgeon.
Nathalie, on Tuesday you headed to Fredericton for a special conference on wildfire preparedness. Tell us a little bit about what you heard at the event. What was it all about?
Yeah, so I always get quite eager to learn about what the province is doing in terms of wildfire season, which is usually in the summer months, beginning in April for about 6 weeks, a little bit longer now that the temperatures are a bit hotter in the summer. Earlier in February, the provincial government announced, alongside the federal government, $40.1 million for wildfire preparedness, which included the launch of the Fire Smart program, which is what we saw in Fredericton on Tuesday. Now, the Fire Smart program involved not only getting new equipment, tanks, hoses, drones, but it also involved upskill training for personnel who work for the Department of Natural Resources and Energy Development. But it also shows homeowners how they can fortify and mitigate their own properties ahead of a wildfire season. You never know where wildfire or forest fire is going to strike, urban, suburban, rural. So that was part of that announcement, and we were able to ask questions as well. And they also said that of that $40 million, $15 million has been allocated to Fire Smart specifically.
So would that have been the week prior? We actually did a Fire Smart workshop at the St. Andrews Fire Department, which Kevin Terrio, our fire chief here in St. Andrews, took me around to the different stations. It showed you how to put out a fire on the stove, what to do if you're upstairs in a fire, and all those things that I think sometimes you learn in elementary school and then they can slip away. I said I actually forgot some of these things.
Yeah, fire safety is a big component of Fire Smart. It's not just about wildfires, but about how to be prepared in the event of a fire. And we showed footage of you last week rolling out of a window. That's the stop, drop, and roll. That's the checking the door to make sure if it's hot, you can't go through it, that sort of thing. But I want to go back for a second to 2023 because I think most people in Charlotte County will remember the Stein Lake Fire, the biggest fire in New Brunswick history in about a decade, burning more than 500 hectares. And when I was here, actually at the time, I was working for Global News, and we were all kind of stationed outside the fire department, eagerly waiting an update. And what surprised me was that there was no alert ready issued after I had talked to a couple of people. So we wanted to look at that, and I've wanted to look at that for a while, so it was one of the first things I actually did when I got to CHCO-TV and The Courier.
Was do your two-part series on Silent Blaze for The Courier, which I think if you haven't read it already, it's worth going to CHCO.TV to check out this incredible two-part piece looking at that exact situation. And honestly, that, as terrible as that fire was and how big a deal it was to cover it at the time, it's actually when we got to know you really well. You were here for multiple days covering it for Global News, and due to CHCO's location, I think a bunch of journalists were working up here, and that's when we really got to know you prior to you joining our team this past summer. But what else did you take away from this conference? What was some of the interesting information that you gathered?
Yeah, so and I did stay here for multiple days, and I stayed at the Picket Fence Motel, so shout out to Sue, who was wonderful and very hospitable. What we did learn, so I filed an RTIPA to kind of take a look at what happened during that span of days where personnel were on the ground and really fighting the fire emergently. And what it revealed is that they didn't feel like they had enough information to issue the alert ready. The evacuation order was actually issued by Fire Chief Kevin Terrio locally on the ground. They went door to door. They felt in the emails, according to the emails, that was sufficient enough to get people out and into the WC O'Neill Arena. And we talked to Mayor Brad Henderson several times about the communication between the municipality and the province, and he's adamant that alert ready was never offered to the municipality. So that again drove this right to information request that I ultimately filed that showed all of the things that are included in the two-part series Silent Blaze. What I did also ask was for an after-action report to hopefully try and learn some of the things and lessons and recommendations that were made out of that fire, given its significance, its size, and what was required of personnel on the ground. And they said in December it wasn't completed. So I took this opportunity at the press conference to ask the minister, the newly named minister of the new Holt government, about that after action report, whether he was aware or whether he'd seen it and whether it was completed. He was very open in saying that he would work towards getting me a response, and even after gave me his personal card and said, at minimum we'll get you a status response on where it is. Not more than 2 hours later, I received an email saying that that report is nearing completion. Mm-hmm. They said it's expected to be released in the spring. It's the spring now, so hopefully it won't be too long before I can have a look at that report and shed some light on what happened behind the scenes and sort of what they're hoping to change or maybe do differently, or what they've learned from that fire.
I think that's why I love a show like this as well, because it really puts a spotlight on the type of work that goes into covering something like this, an investigative piece. How many, just emails alone that go back and forth to get the information that you need to figure out exactly what happened. And having you here to be able to explain this to people at home, it's illuminating. It shows how much effort and how long you can go covering the same issue.
And I certainly appreciate all of the communication staff who work very hard to get us the responses that they do. They all have people that they have to kind of answer to. So, it's difficult to kind of, journalists are often asking difficult questions about difficult topics, and that's not always fun. But we were able to get an answer, and hopefully we will have more answers soon that I'll be able to write and provide to the public.
Okay. Any other takeaways from this conference?
Yeah, I mean, we did ask about, Charlotte County experienced a significant number of really bad storms in the last couple of winters. And, we asked about the debris, the trees that many people will see either laying on the ground or laying along the side of the highway. They've gone ahead and looked at that. They've done some overhead assessment. They don't think that it's as bad as they originally expected. Wildfire season is something that they believe realistically is not something New Brunswick can avoid. We're a forestry heavy area. They simply want to be prepared for when it happens. So it's not an if, it's a when. Mm-hmm. And the other thing that I would really, that I almost forgot to mention, is that FireSmart actually is now going to allow municipalities to apply to have resiliency plans done by the Department of Natural Resources and Energy Development, which will identify critical infrastructure, find areas where they can be prepared and mitigate for future fires, because it will be very important for municipalities, whether they're super urban or rural or suburban, to be prepared and ready for when that does happen.
I know, I think any of us that drive in the direction from St. Andrews to St. John, when you're going through Boquebec, there's still these reminders of what we went through. It was less than 2 years ago. So when you see, what was the scorched earth, it's starting to revive. It still is a reminder of just how potentially devastating something that can be and what impact we're still living with.
And I still have the shoes that I was wearing that day when we walked through that area with a little bit of burnt sole. So it is, these things stick with us, and we understand how these things impact our community, and hopefully they find the work that we're doing helpful and insightful for them.
I mean, we're recording the show in what was we're evacuated people. This is the building that people were going to at the time. And I know then we were thinking, St. Andrews is on a peninsula. Who knows which way the wind blows and what could come with this fire. I remember the first night driving around, and probably now that I look back on it, it was not a good idea, but there we were. I think it was 3 a.m, and just seeing these fires blazing on the side of the road and wondering what would become of it, and just realizing just how easy something like this could happen with these devastating effects. We were lucky to only lose one home and no lives in that fire, but still the community is still, I think, recovering from it in many ways.
The local work of the fire departments here that rush to the aid of the folks in Charlotte County were essential to the lack of injuries and the lack of fatalities and the lack of damage to structures. They really do deserve the credit. And they were assisted by the Department of Natural Resources and Energy Development firefighters as well. So they really deserve the credit here. But it's important that we're able to showcase and to show people what's happening. We're going to take a look at the press conference in Fredericton.
Well, I guess if the weather continues like we've had this last month or so, with, lots of rain, snow, colder temperatures, that works well in our favor. But it's really hard to predict going forward, depending on weather conditions, how severe our year will be. So if I had a crystal ball, it would be great. But right now, that's the best answer I can give you.
Maybe, I just wanted to maybe just to add to that is that we know where we are right now. We're okay. But it only takes like a few days of really, really, really warm weather and really windy weather, and the situation can actually change in terms of where the risk can get dialed up and over a short period of time. So it's hard to predict on a year over a year, but it doesn't take much from a weather system to actually change the level of risk. So for part of your question, have I seen that report? I have not. What the status of that report is that we want to be as transparent as possible. So I'm more than happy to get back to you and to where that actually sits at this point in time. Roger may be able to provide anything more from an immediate perspective, but if you're more than welcome to connect to the office, I'll make sure you have the right numbers, and we can get a clean answer to that question.
So we did fly last year the areas that were hardest hit, and we found that it wasn't as bad as we thought it was going to be. So some of the areas are probably being cleaned up. I know if it's on Crown land that they're probably going to target those areas or have been targeting those areas. On private land, it's hard to say what they're doing. But yeah, those areas are being targeted to salvage firstly. But I don't think they're as big of a problem as we thought they might be. But what we do ask is for people to be prepared in advance, so get an evacuation plan put together. This is something that you can have stuff ready to go. The important papers, make sure you have your credit cards, things like that, and the things you can do to your home before you leave. Make sure all the windows are closed. Turn off your air exchangers so that they're not sucking in any of the embers that are flying by, any of their intakes. So make sure that everything is closed up tight, and then if you can move anything away from the house that might be flammable at that time, move it away. There's a whole series of different things you can do. So there are preparations that can be done and have a plan in advance. Well, it's pretty important because they want to protect those critical infrastructures. If your fire department's burning down, it's hard to help. We want water supply protected, and then you also want to look at parts of the community that may be more at risk. So maybe there's some work that can be done in those subdivisions, those parts of those communities. The Fire Smart program, came out years ago, but it's been in this last year or two, it's been pushed out quite a bit harder and moving forward. So the funding that we are getting from the federal government, in part with the province, is to start working at that and making people aware of their properties and what they can do as well to help their resiliency in case of a wildfire. So, we've all seen that one or two houses that survived in subdivision, and that is basically because their areas or their homes had the Fire Smart application done to them in their yards. So the things, they took the steps that they needed to do to protect their homes. So that's what we're pushing for, and hopefully it's a mitigation tool, and hopefully that the people grab a hold of it and move forward with it.
How many communities have you been to already?
Communities this year? How many did we? I guess we haven't really kept count. We've been to several municipalities or small groups even. We're glad to speak to anyone that wants to have us in. We were here in Fredericton this past weekend. We've been down to St. Andrews. We've been a little bit all over, and we're still moving forward. We have several in the days to come that we will be visiting.
If I could maybe add to that last question. if I could just take a moment to add to that last question. So really what this exercise is, it's an awareness program to a large degree. It's just to making sure that we're doing all the right things to mitigate the level of risk. As you've mentioned in your question itself, that with climate change, the risk for these situations that we see in Nova Scotia locally or even California, they are going to be more frequent. So we need to make sure that we are alert, we are vigilant, and we take initiatives that make our communities and our own homes more resilient. Having said that, is that one aspect of that, I don't know if the right word is to celebrate, but just to understand that the forestry practices that we have at DNR, we have relatively younger forests. That means less underbrush. That means that we don't quite have the same fuel on the forest floor that you would have seen in a Nova Scotia context. Doesn't mean that we're immune to forest fires, but the thing is but there are some advantages in terms of with our forest practices that do mitigate the same level of risk from a fuel perspective, given our forest practices.
That was Fire Smart Coordinator Roger Collette and Minister John Herron taking questions from journalists. We're going to take a quick break, but we'll be right back.
When does our fire service say, you know what, we're exhausted? We've had, triple, quadruple number of calls. So that is a concern, and it's not that we don't want to do this, and we've sent this message to Ambulance New Brunswick. It's just the fact that we're concerned that our volunteer force, which is, we only have one paid member, which is our chief, but our volunteer force is really becoming exhausted through this.
Welcome back to This Week Uncut. I'm Nathalie Sturgeon.
And I'm Vicki Hogarth. We're heading over to Graham and Ann.
On the boat again, here we go. We're going to talk about Graham and Ann's new recycling program, which is a big deal for the island. Now, folks on the mainland, as you'll see, Mayor Morris pointed out, might be a little bit redundant, but it's not for the island. In the past, they've recycled some things, including corrugated cardboard, but not really. So essentially in 2023, the province actually moved to the Extended Recyclers Program, which means that the producers of these products are actually responsible for recycling them. Now that program is administered through Circular Materials. And Graham and Ann has worked with them to come up with a program that fits for the island. And she'll tell you when we play the clip that involved some logistics. But essentially, people will be able to get their own blue bin. It's a voluntary program for now, and its success and continuation are contingent upon participation of folks on the island. And that blue bin will be available for curbside pickup. You can recycle cardboard, hard plastics, no soft plastics or plastic bags. And that is a new service that's going to be available on the island. So it's exciting for them.
Let's take a look at Bonnie Morris discussing recycling on Graham and Ann.
The next is the recycling program, another first for the island. Walk us through what that recycling program is going to look like.
So for anybody on the mainland, this will be a little bit redundant, but for people on Graham and Ann, this is kind of a big thing for us. And people have been looking for some recycling for a while. Right now, we will do corrugated cardboard and some basic things, but this is going to expand to basically consumer packaging. Cereal boxes, that type of cardboard, plastic bottles, some of those types of things. We're going to have pickup, bi-weekly pickup, which is also going to be a completely new thing for the island. And we are hoping to have the contract ready and signed, and we will do that on behalf of Circular Materials, who will pay us to do it. And then that will be delivered to Lawrence Station, where they pick it up for the rest of the area. We also are planning to have a blue bin at the transfer station, so if you miss your pickup day or you are somewhere where you can't get the truck, you still have the option to take your recycling to the transfer station, and people are going there obviously anyway. And it's voluntary. I mean, that I think is the other big thing is, people don't like to be told what to do, so this is completely, it's up to the individual if they want to do it. But from the municipality standpoint, we're really hoping that there is good uptake because there is a cost to moving our garbage cost of trucking it off the island, and a cost of tipping fees when we take it to the landfill. And so any recycling that we do that diverts that waste from our mainstream of garbage ends up saving money for the village, which in the long term is good for everybody. So I'm sure there's going to be some hiccups and bumps along the way, but we're aiming for a May 1st start. So there'll be some more information coming out for residents once we get everything set up and we know what day it is going to be, what it's going to look like. There'll be a sign-up process, and we'll go through all that with people. But we're excited to get this started and see how this does turn out for the island.
Was there a learning curve? Was there anything that surprised you in that process of kind of navigating that contract and understanding the process?
I think yes, because it's a completely new thing again for us. I mean, it's not something that we normally do. I mean, we're very used to taking our own garbage, taking that to the landfill. But I think there was also a learning curve on the part of Circular Materials, because coming and doing a weekly pickup on Graham and Ann is a little bit more complicated than it is in Eastern Charlotte, just across the bay. So I think when they realized what some of the logistical challenges were on Graham and Ann, it made a lot more sense to partner with us to be able to do something that made sense for Graham and Ann and also provided the service that they needed. So it's a short-term contract to start out with, just for everybody, another one of those trials, just to see what it looks like and see, what we've forgotten, what they've forgotten. But I'm hopeful that it's going to work out, and this is going to be a good thing for the island.
That was Mayor Bonnie Morris of Grand Manan talking about their new recycling program. We're going to go now to Eastern Charlotte. They finally held their council meeting. It was two smashed into one because they didn't have a quorum at the last monthly meeting. But something came up that really again, is resurfacing, which is this rise in medical calls. And Councillor Adam Hatt had a very frank conversation about how that is impacting the municipality. And there was questions about how this might fiscally strain resources. You were there, so what did that conversation seem like to you?
I think what's really interesting about these moments when you're watching council meetings is it really illuminates a bigger issue, and it's definitely, as a journalist, where you might find that nugget that speaks to something that's happening province-wide, maybe across the country as well. And what they're noticing is that there is this uptake in especially volunteer fire departments having to respond to these medical calls. And they're not necessarily trained to deal with the situations they're dealing with. Sometimes it has to do with something like an overdose, something that really a medically trained professional should do. And there is this concern too that maybe if Ambulance New Brunswick becomes too reliant on these volunteer departments picking up cases, picking up situations in the region, that they might not be as available in a shorter amount of time to get to these emergencies, and that shouldn't fall on a volunteer fire department. So that's the conversation that's being had, and that comes from looking at data, right? How many calls are they responding to, and what is the nature of these calls?
And it's important for the public to understand that the fire departments in Charlotte County are volunteer. They typically have one full-time member, which is usually their chief. But the majority of the people who respond to fire calls, medical calls, car accidents are volunteers who have full-time jobs, and they're being called out of whatever they're doing to come and respond. And it was very interesting to me last night that Chief Administrative Officer Jason Gadet said, I think people are grateful that somebody's coming. Mm-hmm. And it speaks to the lack of coverage that is available by Ambulance New Brunswick. And again, for the public's knowledge, Ambulance New Brunswick runs the ambulance service, which is a public service that is run by a private organization. The province of New Brunswick contracts to Medavie to have that service. So it was a scary conversation for them to be having. Obviously, they were talking about certain instances where a matter of minutes actually does matter, and if the ambulance is 20 or 30 minutes away, but the fire department is only 5, they're going to be grateful somebody's coming. Mm-hmm. And the other thing is that a lot of volunteer fire departments don't have the scope of practice that a paramedic does. So they're going to have a limited number of tools in their toolbox to be able to assist on certain types of calls. Mm-hmm. So it's interesting to see that conversation is still happening, even from back in February when we initially reported on this.
Right, and I think too is if you see something like the rise of overdoses in a community as well taking center stage, then obviously that might put more strain on a fire department to in the immediate, right, in terms of calls and what they're responding to. But the thing is, that's why data is so important. If we're looking at all these informations and putting them together, then it speaks to what the bigger problem is.
Yeah, and we did ask about those things because drugs were mentioned during the council meeting, and also the mental health of the folks that are responding to these calls, right? It is difficult to see these things even as a person who's trained to see them. And so, you know, Councillor Hatt was adamant that there be support for those folks as well. But we did ask Chief Administrative Officer if there was a threshold in which the resources that they have, not financial, but actual people, there would come a time when it would just be too much. There'd be too many medical calls for them to kind of respond to. Here's a look at the debate from the council in Eastern Charlotte.
I know that this is a delicate question, and this is a question for our CAO. And keep in mind, in no way am I criticizing the fire department or the volunteers that are putting their lives that way. No question about that. I'm just concerned because if you look at the report for February 2025, you see an increase by over 18 calls. Last year there was 1 call. This year there was 19 calls for total rescue and resuscitation. And then again, and you look at for March, you see another increase, another big increase where last year there were 7 calls and this year there were 39. So my question to our CAO is this fiscally feasible long term?
You know, it's difficult to put numbers on a medical call, really. And I mean, you know, our fire service, they're dedicated that when a call comes in, especially whether it's a fire or just, you know, a medical call, they're reacting to it. So it will no doubt be increases with the number of calls and, you know, what we're having to pay out for our volunteer firefighters. So there is a fiscal change that comes about with this. But, you know, at this point, I don't know what the alternatives are, with the exception of lobbying Ambulance New Brunswick to maybe staff more. There certainly is a gap, and you know they're doing a very good job to fill that, and we're hearing a lot of great things with response time, and I think for residents, I think you know, if you're in trouble and you're calling and the ambulance is saying that they're 45 minutes away, at least now you know that there is somebody else coming quickly, whether it's, you know, just as simple as a choking call or somebody with high blood pressure. So they are certainly filling a gap that wasn't there before. So it's something that I think that, again, maybe going back to UMNB and trying to lobby the province to afford more funding and hiring with Ambulance New Brunswick. But, you know, I guess as far as the fire service, and I know Chief Johnson's not here, but, you know, for the fire service, when the call comes in, they're going to go, and they'll always be dedicated to that. It's just we need to ensure that the funding is there, and it's a new reality that we're into as well. So any help, I guess, on the you know, on the council side of lobbying for those extra staffing would be appreciative. But it's certainly sustainable because the guys are doing a great job with that, and we'll always support them. I mean, this is just another way of responding to calls, whether it's a fire call or a medical call. We have residents that are in trouble, and but yeah, it's certainly something that has changed the type of calls, and you have to kind of go back to the root reason for that. And it's just, I think there was always a delay with Ambulance New Brunswick in some cases, but with now protocols changing, if ambulances are far out, then they're dispatching fire. At least now there's somebody coming versus a delay. So in many cases, it's really made a difference of life and death. So I think, you know, it'll be interesting to see at the end of the year how that impacts it. I don't see it being too much, but I mean, it does have trickling effects of ensuring that, you know, our firefighters are supported with training, that we have the proper equipment to deal with those type of medical calls, and as well, you know, it's more supplies that we may need as well. So there will be an added impact, but I think most residents will say that's probably something that they would rather have at that moment in need, to know that there's actually somebody coming versus, you know, 30 minutes out or 20 minutes out. So we'll certainly keep an eye on it and see what that's going to look like at the end of the year. But, you know, again, I think just, you know, our fire service does a great job, and knowing that somebody's going to be coming, at least with a medical bag, it's important.
Any other questions? Councillor Hatt.
I know myself, it's, I don't know how you guys do it. I don't know how the firefighters do it, all hours, days, nights. And let's be honest, in the last 2 weeks, look at the funeral home websites around. Most of them are not ones that I know myself, I don't want to roll up on in the middle of the night and have to deal with that either. And I don't know how they do that and how mentally they stay strong to do that. And my heart goes out to them for that. Not to mention that, hey, whether we like to admit it or not, we are in a drug crisis in today's age versus where we were. And you know, when them fire trucks are rolling down the road, I don't know how many firefighters are in here. I know there's a couple of guys down back I see there. Raise up your hands. You trained on Narcan? 100%. So they're getting there quick. And if there's a chance that that's somebody's life for a second, to be able to give them 1, 2, 3 shots, I hear, of Narcan to get them back, then you know what? I lay my head down at night and I'm okay with that, as long as they're okay mentally with that. But it is something that's being pushed off slowly. You can see that from over the last few years, but I know for myself, I'll never deviate on my passion that them guys go above and beyond, and girls, sorry, go above and beyond, and my hat's tipped to you. Thank you.
No, I think we're very fortunate that we have a fire department that's willing to do that. We have a fire chief we're very fortunate we have a fire chief that's actually trained and is a professional. The other fire departments in the province are doing the same thing. Just down the road in St. Andrews, the fire chief down there is actually, his background is the ambulance service, and they have 2 or 3 members on the department that their background is the ambulance. So we're very fortunate that we have a fire department that care and are willing to do this, because all it takes is save one life, and it's well worth every penny. You can't put a price tag on a life. Save one life. It doesn't matter to me who walks through that door, if he's a ambulance person or a fire department. As long as they're coming through the door to save my life, that's great.
That was the council in Eastern Charlotte debating and discussing a rise in medical calls for their fire department.
We had a chance to talk after council to Chief Administrative Officer Jason Gaudette about this very topic. I do want to sort of the interview, but I think I'd like to preface it by saying that I was at the council meeting with Florence, who was in the back directing, producing the show. We had Dawson Hatt from Blacks Harbor on camera. I got to sit in the audience. You were watching live on CHCO's YouTube channel. So when it came time to do interviews after council, it's kind of neat because Nathalie calls me on my phone. I put it on speaker. So when you're watching this clip, you'll see how sometimes we tag team do interviews if we're both working on different stories. But we tend to be all over this beautiful region of ours, which is complicated by things like islands. So when one of us is in one town and the other is in another, we still sometimes manage to do an interview together, which is very special, and I love that collaborative aspect of what we do.
Yeah, it's what I value so much about this team, is that we work together in ways that are collaborative and really supportive, and sometimes I feel like we share a brain, because as I was thinking and formulating my next question, listening to Jason's responses, you were right there and ready to ask the question, and sometimes you took the question right out of my mouth. So it was really great to work together and kind of figure out the right questions that we needed to get some answers for folks.
Let's take a look.
For this level, we just look at them as all medical calls. But with that said, we know, just with some of the activity in local funeral homes, unfortunately, we've lost a lot of people due to overdoses, and I think that's where Councillor Hatt's comments were tonight. It's unfortunate that we're losing young people, but we also know that through conversations with fire members that this is becoming more and more frequent. But I'm sure Chief Johnson can give you details on splitting that down some.
Thank you so much.
And just finally, you said during the meeting, which I thought was very important, is that it's reassuring to folks to know that someone is coming. But I'm wondering if there's a threshold for calls that you might reach that would be unsustainable with your current resources.
Yeah, and that's a question I'm always questioning Chief Johnson on. I mean, he's got a great pulse with his members. And I think that's a concern that's right across the municipal world in New Brunswick. So I know, speaking to other administrators, that's we're not so worried about the fiscal side of things. I mean, it's certainly important, but when does our fire service say, we're exhausted? We've had triple, quadruple number of calls. So that is a concern, and it's not that we don't want to do this, and we've sent this message to Ambulance New Brunswick. It's just the fact that we're concerned that our volunteer force, which is, we only have one paid member, which is our chief, but our volunteer force is really becoming exhausted through this, and and I think that's going to be even more and more important, and I think that's why I said with council tonight that to try to make this more of a political item. We do need help. It's not, we're not at a level where we're concerned today, but yeah, how long can we sustain this? I think that's the big question, and it's something that we as community leaders have to look at and say, this is something that's on the horizon that's going to hit us, and that's why I encouraged our council to sort of start reaching out through their associations with UMNB and other municipalities to start asking these questions of where is the relief coming, because yes, we can continue to do it, but we're concerned that Ambulance New Brunswick may start to build this into some of its own planning, to say we have a 30 or 40 minute window where it's covered by volunteer sources. We would caution them about that, because we're just concerned that we're going to get to a point where our volunteer force is just exhausted.
That was Eastern Charlotte Chief Administrative Officer Jason Gaudette. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back after this.
Visibility and police presence and involvement in the community, which is very, very important to establish relationships with people in the communities.
And let people know that this disease doesn't have to define you to just hide, because he's still the same person.
Welcome back to This Week Uncut. We're going to look ahead now to
next week.
All of the things that we have to do in the next week. It feels like it never slows down.
It never slows down. There is the federal election on April 28th, so that's always looming. Next week will be interesting for a number of reasons, including just the lead up to an election, which I think when you're a journalist, that's always exciting no matter what's going on. But I am actually extremely excited for a show that we have coming out next week. This will be an episode of Southwest Magazine. Sid Carnigan and his wife, Karen, were in studio this week to film a show about ALS and talking about Sid's journey with ALS. He was diagnosed in 2019. 6 years later, he is still sharing his journey and explaining to people the process of what they've been through. And Karen as well, because from a caretaker perspective, that's also part of the journey. It's a journey for a whole family.
People seem to shy away from people that have a disability. Not just Sydney, but any disability people. And he might not be able to answer all your questions if I'm not right there, but I'm usually right there by his side so that I can say what he needs, what he wants me to say. But with this disease, you might lose your ability to walk and talk and use your hands and things. But he's as smart as a whip. His brain is the same as it always was. People don't understand the disease because they will come up and say, "Do you know who I am?" Right. I think the most important thing about ALS is just do a little research on it and realize that you might be disabled in some ways, but you're still the same person.
And it can be confused. That would be one of the bigger misconceptions, is maybe confusing it with dementia.
Yeah, right. Yeah, but no, he knows what's going on.
If there's a message, one message you could get across to people at home today, what would you want people to take away from hearing your story, Karen, and Sid's story together? I think it's just as important, your side as well.
Just don't give up. Just don't take the diagnosis that you're going to die today. You're not going to necessarily die in a month or 6 months or a year. Our journey is 6 years, and he's still doing very well. And just accept it, but stay positive.
You were here for the recording of it. It was an emotional episode, in part because of his positivity. Sid was just one of those special humans that takes a challenge that life has given him and is giving back with that challenge. And it really is. I think we managed to not cry till the very end, but he did have us in tears.
I absolutely cried. I was in the back room, so I had the freedom to cry. But that show is the reason why I work here and why I came to work here. It's because these are the stories that matter to people, being able to sit them down and give them a voice to talk about the things that they want to talk about. And you're right, caregiving is difficult. The burden of chronic illness is not just on the person, but on the people who love them and live with them. And so it was wonderful to be able to have that and to share that moment. And I really look forward to the final product.
And I really do want to stress that too. If you have those stories from the community to share, our TV station, while small and focused on rural southwest New Brunswick, there's province-wide coverage. You reach a lot of people by sharing your stories, and we're also on Bell Satellite across Canada. So it's amazing the viewer response we get while we focus on this region. Their stories are illuminating people's lives near and far, but it's your willingness to share your own personal journeys and experiences that really are what we do here. Those are the stars of CHCO. When I think about it, I think of our job as kind of like being the MC of the community, but the stars are the people and the stories and the community itself.
Yeah, it's about the platform that we offer to the community. This station exists because of you and for you, so take advantage of it. Come and share your stories and reach out to us naturally. But you've got some more things on the list. The RCMP are coming back, I believe.
RCMP are coming back next week. They were actually supposed to come this week. There was a missing person case that ended up obviously taking priority, and so we've rebooked for next week. We're going to talk a little bit about different policing issues in the community, as well as I know there's been some very high-profile arrests recently, and hopefully we'll have some news on a number of different topics from the RCMP. They're going to speak to the most recent scams that they're seeing in New Brunswick as well, and how you can be on alert for them, what to do if you see them. It's becoming a regular part of Southwest Magazine, which I love. Staff Sergeant Jeffrey Peters and Officer and Sergeant Christopher Henderson were here like just about a month ago, I think it was, for the first big long sit down with the RCMP, and it was their idea to come regularly and sit down and talk to Southwest New Brunswick about everything that's going on. So again, same email as always, news@CHCO.TV if you have questions for the RCMP as well. I can tell you that show online had thousands of views. I can never tell how many people watch on television, but online it had thousands and thousands of views.
People really do appreciate hearing and seeing police officers. I think it's very important to them, and I think that the RCMP recognize that. They understand that they do these things called Coffee with a Cop, which I think is also part of their engagement strategy. So it's important to see them and to know that they're out there and they're communicating as effectively as they can. It's interesting because I'm just in the midst of writing a story out of St. Andrews Council where they've actually asked to be actively involved in the negotiations with the National Police Federation, which is the union that represents the RCMP in Canada, about their next contract. So, there's a lot of things that we'll be kind of watching in terms of that negotiation and how, and it's important to note that actually the RCMP are the largest provider to municipalities across the country. Cities and large municipalities of certain sizes have their own police forces. So RCMP mainly deals with rural and smaller parts of the country and municipalities in general. So I'm excited to kind of be here for that show and see what happens.
Exciting. I guess we'll be gearing up for the election as well. What are you looking ahead at?
I've got a lot of things on the agenda. I'm still catching up from last week. St. Andrews Council, St. Stephen Committee of the Whole, they discussed, both councils, as we mentioned in our last episode of this week, Uncut, are discussing the composition of council. They discussed the crosswalk policy. We just had Eastern Charlotte last night. They talked about reclassifying the municipality as a town, which they approved in 2023. So now they're sending that off to the province. We're also looking at some the YMCA in Eastern Charlotte, which is doing tremendously well there and providing a lot of programming to a lot of folks.
You're looking at having about 1,000 or 7,000 participants in this year alone when they started off in the hundreds, and now it's at 7,000 a year. quite exciting. And a page from the YMCA has actually extended an offer for us to come do a tour. So I think that could be a fun day on the road.
I would love to go do some YMCA programming. I didn't have that as a kid in rural New Brunswick, so I would love to go for a day and see what it's all about.
They have pickleball. We will try this. We will try this.
I don't know if I'd be a good pickleball player, but we'll see.
Thanks for joining us this week on This Week Uncut. I'm Vicki Hogarth.
And I'm Nathalie Sturgeon.